Welcome to the Tone Lounge Podcast, the definitive music industry and gear podcast with Jonathan Gilmet and Frank Fleckenstein.
What's up, guys? Good morning. Welcome to the Tone Lounge Podcast, episode number 15. My name is Frank. I'm your host, and today with me is my good buddy and co-host Jonathan Gilmet, live from Belgium, and also coming to us live from Saarbrücken in one of the most beautiful parts of Germany, Thomas Blug from BluGuitar. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Belgium. Good morning, Frank.
Nice to have you. Nice to have you with us. A little introduction for. I don't think that anybody who is kind of into electric guitars and like generally somehow connected with the industry does not know who you are. That would be like very weird because you've been, especially in the past, like sort of 10 years, pretty much in everybody's faces and minds. But maybe a little introduction. Thomas is a very accomplished and very seasoned guitar player who has been working in this industry for, well, as long as I can remember. And I'm in this industry for like 25, 26 years now. And he's been in it way longer. He's been working with Hughes and Kettner on the product development side for quite some time. And then at some point decided to go his own ways and realizing some of the things that he had in mind. And actually I might be like about 10 years ago or something. That's around the time, the first time that I heard about, well, the invention that to me changed a lot of things in this industry amplifier wise, which was the first edition of the Amp 1. And so that's the short introduction to to Thomas. How are you doing these days? How was we talked about it we wanted to talk about it briefly, but how was NAMM for you this year?
Well, first of all, I'm fine. Second, NAMM was great. Although we have to face the facts that trade shows of that kind will be a thing of the past in the future, which now let's describe it. In 2020, the NAMM, this was pre-COVID, the last year, or this was the year when COVID started, where everybody had COVID and didn't know what it was. And I probably caught it too at the NAMM show, and my colleagues also, because they all had kind of weird symptoms. But that NAMM show in January 2020 was the biggest NAMM show I do remember. And then the COVID days came, and 2021 was like nothing, was an online version, and 2022 was a very the lousiest NAMM ever, held in June, I guess it was. Like they forgot to book the slot in January, so nobody was there except for me. So I've seen I've seen the future already in the past in 2020, and then 2023 was getting to April. The NAMM was back in April, moving towards January, having a more attendances, and this year was almost as big as the 2020.
Okay.
But I think it was the peak, since everybody after the pandemic was keen on having the trade show NAMM experience again. And we all have to understand that the big companies are out anyway. Fender wasn't there, Gibson wasn't there, Mesa wasn't there. So basically the biggest brand was Martin acoustic guitars, and then a lot of smaller brands like Friedman, like myself, and Hughes and Kettner celebrating their 40th anniversary, which I will do my 10th year anniversary in 2 weeks. But anyway, so it is all good. So summing up, the NEM experience it was great to be there because I met a lot of people from the industry, and that was the big thing. On the other hand, I know they have to change the format to something that makes sense these days. And I have a big question mark about if NEM can actually succeed in doing that. I mean, we have seen Frankfurt show disappearing and for the guitar players being replaced by the Guitar Summit with a fresh new concept where there's business to customers, B2C, and the business to business is kind of the side effect, which is there because the industry people meet. But the focus of the whole event is business to customers with tons of great seminars and of course an exhibition, but the focus is not the paying lots of money for having a booth, hoping for dealers to show up to spend their money on your booth. That's not happening anymore. That's a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So in that respect, NEM was a vibrant event. I enjoyed it very much, knowing that probably this was one of the last good ones.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's also interesting that you just brought up Guitar Summit, because I spoke with a few people at Guitar Summit. I didn't have a chance to speak that much to you because at Guitar Summit, everybody's always pulling at you from all sides. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's like you have this. It's almost like you're like a stick full of honey, and you have like millions of bees flying around you all the time wherever you go. But it's interesting because when I spoke to people at Guitar Summit, and I conducted a few interviews with people who know both shows, and they both said, is like, this is really nice because it's super relaxed. It is super like organized. You know where to go. You don't have to walk a million miles to go from A to B. But yeah, it seems like NAMM being like generally smaller than it used to be like 10 years ago or something, with lesser people attending, smaller booths, smaller and medium-sized companies. It's getting there. Still, it remains very, very expensive, especially if if you consider the cost of traveling there and everything.
Yeah, I can have a few facts, like the parking at NAMM is $20 per day. And I remember it was 10, like 10 years ago. Then it went up to 12, and then 15, and then just after the pandemic, it made this huge jump. I think from 15 to 20.
Yeah,
and this reflects the overall costs over there. I mean, getting
in relation to, like, so everything's twice as expensive as 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like you have to use a company like Freeman, they're called, to get your gear loaded in, and just to move a pallet, to receive and move a pallet to the booth was, I think, $400.
Wow.
I mean, so you take this kind of money, and I had like the smallest booth possible. I was sharing a booth with like 2 other companies at a very nice spot. So I've done my efficiency program, like who do I know in the industry and who can I team up with? So, and yeah. So that's my answer to the high costs. Still be there, but trying to save on every end as much as possible. That's the only way to do it. And there will be I can see that the whole thing will get even further apart. Like the prices will go up even more, and I have no means in reducing. And that's the point for every exhibitor. You have to travel there, you have to have accommodation, you have to have food, you have to have all these extra costs. And if you sum it up, easily 20,000 euros are spent with a very small team. And then imagine you have a decent company, medium-sized, with like 10 people there, 50,000, 100,000. This is where the money goes. And these days we have the internet. We can do other ways of making our business. So it's probably not effective. For me, the guerrilla style, having low costs, still being there, still works. There comes the question when it's not possible anymore.
Okay. Got a question for you, Thomas. Usually when you do something like this, there's a return on investment. So let's say you put $20,000 to go to an event like this. You expect at least some kickback financially from meeting other companies, being able to sell products ahead of time. Do you find that to have decreased over the years? Is the importance of NAMM and the connections you make less relevant, or is it just about the same but with a higher cost now?
I would take it as a personal question for this NAMM. I was happy with the results. What were the results? My results were I have been on a lot of different YouTube channels, and one of the videos is maybe reaching 150,000 one of these days. So there's a value. There are some other YouTube channels that also were stepping by the booth and spread the news or whatever, reporting from BluGuitar. And the funny thing was, I did my own walk through NAMM, having probably the most views besides. No, I think it was maybe even more views than the other most popular shows that I have done. And so this was a side effect. I didn't even plan that. And we did it on the first day, and then my video guy caught something and he couldn't edit the whole thing, so we were kind of late. So it was kind of the last day at NAMM that we did the walkthrough. So we were not even performing as we would, or as we have should done it. But still, that video was watched a lot. Okay, that's the thing about the online presence. What is even more important for me is kind of the business that I can do with the industry people. Because writing emails is a totally different thing than meeting your suppliers personally, maybe having dinner with them or just spend half an hour at the booth and show them who you are, what you are doing, and excite them, because that's for me the biggest asset, that I can excite my suppliers, and this gives me a better ranking, because my business is not the biggest. I'm not the biggest company, but if they like what I do and understand what I do, they are happy to go that extra mile that I sometimes ask for my speaker suppliers, for instance, or my housing for the speaker suppliers, and this is via email. It doesn't work. It needs to be face to face. I have to show them. They have to feel it. I have to play a little bit, and then there's this extra value for them, and that comes back for me. I could only travel to Asia to do this kind of. But then, I don't have my amps with me when I visit them in the factory. So these are the magic moments where I can charge our relationships with fresh energy. And in this little business we are all in, if you're not one of the big players with the big money in your hand, what is the value that pays? I mean, of course there is money, but in the end, if they remember me being the guy that made them happy or is more passionate than others, that gives their job a reason. It's like, when I talk to my loudspeaker designer guy, and he smiles because he can feel how excited I am about his last sample, and I show him what it is, what I mean, and that's priceless, basically. And there is that value. But it could be any other meeting as well, as long as we have the meeting. So that's the thing about NAMM. People go there because that's probably the only place to meet these days, besides Summit. But talking about speaker manufacturers, they might also do audio speakers. So for them, it makes more sense to be at a show that does guitars and audio.
Yeah. Totally makes sense.
Return
of investment. Exactly.
Investment. Yeah. Okay. Finally, to answer that question.
No worries.
Sorry for but I think I want to give a complete picture here.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
If I would do return on investment in a very hard way, it is like I spent the money, that money that I invested, I would probably have evenly got back as a value.
Okay.
But it has not the same quality since the personal level is involved. When I would try to get those YouTubers to make the video, I would have to ask them and I would have to pay for them. And it happened totally naturally. I didn't ask them. They were interested. They came to me and they just did it, So for me, I hate to pay people for something, because it's not that I want that they make the money, but I don't want to. If somebody makes a video about my products, it feels shit to pay, because either they like the product or they hate it. But giving money for that, it's the wrong signal, So I've never really did paid videos for my gear. It feels very strange.
I understand. We had a conversation with Andy Ferris a couple of episodes ago, where he said, what they're paying for is the time that I invested and my reach, essentially. So, looking at it, I'm as a manufacturer whose current business is a little bit frozen, but as a manufacturer, I feel the same way as you. It always felt weird to send someone money and say, "Hey, please make a great video," because because for some reason it feels weird. You feel like, okay, everybody's doing that the same way, so somehow the video is going to turn out great. It's going to look great and everything, but does it actually make things happen for me? Is it gonna increase my business? Is it gonna increase my visibility? With his reach, with this person's reach, am I going to get to the maybe next level? And that is something that, for me, it didn't happen on a large scale, but then again, I fully understand where you're coming from, and it's obviously way better if somebody is excited about your product and comes around and says, hey, I would love to do a video about that. I want to feature it on my channel, on my, media outlet, whatever. Can you send one over? It's...
Yeah. And on the other hand, is like, if you don't pay them, it feels like they are free, which they should be. And I'm totally happy, even if they make videos bashing my product. But I mean, this helps them to be for their credibility. They, the all yes men kind of thing doesn't help anybody, because then everything is great and then nothing is special, and then special becomes great and super special becomes the new standard, and where there is no value in the information anymore. Yeah. So for me, it's totally fine that YouTubers bash things, even if they do if somebody has a critique about something, I'm happy, because that's the way how I can improve. And it's okay. It maybe tells a story that this guy prefers that product because it's a different thing, and it's great for what he thinks, and that's his power. And I'm not afraid of that anyhow, because I know what I'm doing, and I know that there are reasons for buying my product, and there's reasons for buying other products. A totally natural thing. And I don't want to argue, because this is like the freedom of choice, and this is great, because we are all different. We all have different styles. We all of different tastes. We want to have different looks and feel, and so the information about what's on the market, that is what the YouTubers are doing, and they should have their taste and can even bash. Yeah. But if you pay them, how to pay somebody that bashes you? Yeah. That doesn't work.
I know some people who do it. I know some people who do it anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna share with you guys maybe a different perspective on the whole YouTuber thing. So when people watch, there's two things that they want. They either want a review or they want a demonstration, and they're not synonymous with each other. There's a clear distinction between both. So let's say I was to get a pedal from a company, and they're saying, here, we're sending it to you, but there's no strings attached. They're not asking me for anything. They're just sending it. Most of the time, I'm doing a product demonstration on my YouTube channel. Now, a review for me would be something that I buy and gives me total freedom to express how I feel about it. But if I express how I feel about a product that I'm demonstrating, I'm falling short, because the point is to show what the product can do. So if there's any shortcomings in the product that I'm demonstrating, the audience will hear it, and they'll know that they're like, one thing that I do is I just got these from Joyo. I got a bunch of pedals from Joyo. So what I do whenever I'm doing product demonstration for them is I crank everything. I just put it up. So if there's any weird oscillation, background noise, or intermittent issues, that's going into the demo. The audience will hear it. But if I'm like not demonstrating that, and I'm pretending that I'm doing a review, and I'm like, this is a great product, but I'm being disingenuous because I didn't even show you. I'm just giving you what looks like an opinion. So I think that is the distinction between paying someone to demo versus paying them to do a review. Because if you're paying them to do the review, you're just basically buying a positive review.
Yeah. Yes.
But if you're paying them just to demonstrate it, and they're just showing everything, but they're not saying if they like it or don't like it, then that might be a better way to look at paying someone, like, let's say, like Andy Ferris. If he wants to give his opinion, he can, because you didn't ask him to do a review. You just asked him to demonstrate it. And you might say, this is a great product, but I would like to see this improved in the future, or I think that the company could do better with this thing here. So just my way of looking at it when it comes to the distinction between both those things. Because a lot of people, sometimes they get on my YouTube channel and they're like, well, why don't you give your opinion? Because this is not a review. It's a product demonstration. Yeah. If you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. but I'm not going to put it in the video.
See.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. One thing we can definitely say for sure, and I actually kind of repeated some research on this before we started this today. With the Amp 1, you actually created, similar to another company that I very much have in my heart, which is Two Notes. Exactly, that's the one. You pretty much created a new product category. I think it's fairly safe to say that, and I want to share one memory with you, and you tell me if you had the same impression. When you came out with this, I thought the first thing, people didn't understand it. That was the first thing. People didn't understand what it was. It was like, okay, like a pedalboard amp? What? So first people didn't understand it. Then people understood it, but they didn't believe it. They were like, it's impossible that this small thing has 100 watts and can keep up with, like, you know, my Marshall head or my whatever. Exactly. And once people understood it and believed it, because you showed them and other artists showed them that it was possible, and then you had some artists touring with it as well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point they were like, okay, this is great. And then people came around and actually started, you know, getting into the same sort of niche, same sort of category. That's my memory of how the timeline went. So how much time did it take you to convince people?
I'm still doing it every day. and just this morning.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, let's do the treatment then. No. Yeah. No, it's all good. Just this morning I got another message from Jefferson Starship guitar player, the former one. Now there's Jude Gold, who is playing an amp 1, and now he is playing this amp in the US on tour. We are not as well known in the US as we are over here, and you know, so I can see.
So weird.
I get the message. It's like, man, Jude showed me the thing, and it's like brand new for them, and they're going totally excited because he has seen the results. You know, he has seen 3 bands on the big stage, and Jude playing the amp 1, and the other guys had their big heads, and he had like the same or even better tone or whatever. And this guy was watching the band that he was playing in and thinking like, unbelievable, you know. And then the guy that plays the gig now comes up with this little box here, and now he's totally excited. You know, he writes with the email, and like, he played it, he feels it. He says, you know. So, but honestly, that whole curve that Frank just described about convincing people, I had with myself before I created a product. I mean, I wear 2 hats. I am a guitar player, and that is heavily biased by my taste for vintage gear, Stratocasters, Marshall amps, Fender amps, the tradition par excellence. You know, for me, my life is split into the teens, where I was dreaming about the music and David Gilmour and Richie Blackmore and another Moore and Gary Moore and more of these.
More.
Like, okay, there's like this world of Marshall amps and whatnot. So this was a dream world in my head. The next phase, in my 20s, I became the freelance demonstrator for Hughes and Kettner, and I was working on very progressive amplifier concepts having the experience that it does not sound good. My first job was to demonstrate a programmable amplifier by using Kettner, and I played it, and I came back and I said, "Hey guys, the concept is somehow great, but it sounds not like my Vox AC30 or my Marshall or my Fender." So I took all my 3 amps there. And then I ended up in research and development for the next 27 years.
Nice.
And my main job was kind of um, demonstrating the things, but also challenging the R&D department. I'm a technician myself, but not at the highest level. I can mod tube amps at a low level, which I have done. Marshall mods, and my Mesa Boogie has been modded when I was a teenager. But then I decided to become a guitar player, and I sold all my electronic stuff. Then I was in the R&D department, having somebody to work with. So I was just the guy that was doing the challenges, knowing a little bit about the electronics and saying, here is the problem, there's the problem, you find a solution for that and that. And then heavy fights. And then the result was, in the end, that I learned the first 10 years, tube amps are the best. And I built up my own collection about blackface and Marshalls and another Marshall and another pedal and all this holy grail gear, just like my 61 Strat. And then over the Houston Kettner days, I learned we can get pretty far with alternative circuits, but there is still the last little gap between that and the real deal. So I was always about the real deal. Guys, give me the real deal, because as a musician, I don't compromise. Whatever it takes, I would buy it and use it. That's me. So, and when I came to the point with using Kettner that we tried to do that flexible tri-amp with 13 tubes and everything in the amp, I found that this was a solution, and still I was missing some things. Then I discovered that the all tube direction has limits as well. I mean, I've been involved in modeling around 2000 with the Zentera, and I experienced the benefits and the limitations of modeling. Then after the 2000s, or before that, we had the all tube triumph phase and all that stuff, and in between we had also some transistor projects with like more affordable constructions. The thing is, I discovered, after being in all 3 technologies, that the analog, not 100% tube technology, is the one that gives me most signal quality, and like no side effects, because no latency, no conversion, no bandwidth limitations, no tube tolerance bullshit. Like, tubes have 20-25% tolerance. How to build consistent amps. I mean, if I have one magic O tube amp, selecting my holy grail tubes for that one particular amp, I can get a great amp. But the moment I try to replicate that amp, I have to buy components, and it's a nightmare to get good components these days. I mean, it's possible, but in the end, such a tube amp has to be $5,000 if you want to go all the way. And so that was a logical step in my head. Like, there is my future, and this is what I believe. Then, being the musician, you are on stage, and then having my first prototype of the M1 in the bigger box and stuff like that. It's like you go on stage and you play it. I was cheating. I had that tube amp, and behind the tube amp, hidden, nobody knew it, I had a little plastic box with what later became the amp one. And I played that, and it's like, is it real? Is it actually working? And I found out, yes, it is. And then this is my backup amp project. I went to let's make this my amp. This is why I called it the amp one and not my backup amp or pedal amp. It's like amp one, period. This is the one amp, and I'm serious about that. So even to myself, and now years later, I have proven it works, and now I have other people that went through the same kind of phase. And the funny thing is, with my new toy, the Amp X, I'm going through the same procedure now, because
oh wow,
since the 1st of January this year, I'm just playing this, not because there's something wrong with Amp 1. No, it's just I have to find all the software bugs and the things that I want to improve with this. So I live with this on every gig. I played, what is it? Today is Monday. Saturday I played. No, Friday night I played with this. And, it's like you are on stage and you have everything programmed. And there's a few controls that I already have implemented, like my boost and my power drive, where this kind of is loading the front end, and this is kind of loading the power amp. And I wish these would be functional already. They will be, but they are not. And what I also was missing was kind of my master EQ that works over all the presets, because what happened was I was playing in a place, what is it, like a city town hall with a lot of glass, very harsh sound. I mean, like, I made the bass drum pretty big so we could stand a balance between the harsh rest of the band and filled up the lower frequency with the bass drum. So this was kind of, and I on my amp one, my fast treatment would have been very simple. I would have had a touch more bass and a touch less treble, just like that. Like, reduce this and increase this. 5 seconds, done. But I had to play the whole entire gig with the Amp X not having this, because you have no time to go through all the presets and dial in everything perfect. It is all already on my agenda on the wishes, but it's not finished yet. And this is, on the other hand, I already play that amp and I know, wow, I have a few things that are even improved in the versatility, which I can use for my personal preferences now. I have recreated one of my 50-watt Marshalls for my collection, which was my go-to amp for many years in the studio, even before using Kettner. This was funny. My stuff is old, and this is when I was 17 or 19, even before anything. I had bought the best gear. Actually, I was lucky. I had a good taste. And I met the right people, and I bought the
nice.
I bought good stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, and this amp on the Amp X now gives me something that I was really enjoying that night. So what I'm trying to say here is it's a process. So Frank says, okay, there's things in our heads like, this cannot be true. People still go, it's like, yeah, and where's your amp? I said, like, this, it's called Amp 1. And there's a speaker out, there's a power inlet, and there's a guitar inlet. And this gives you 100 watts? Yes, it does. But it's, how can it work? How can it? Well, it does work. And it's just because we are a little bit more innovative than the rest of the world. But hey, this is somebody has to do it. I'm convinced, and I think this is not a good project for a company that would simply create a product that they can easily sell, because that's my job, to be there and teach the world there is an alternative to lugging around 25 kilograms. I mean, I can do it like this, no, easily, and I can hold it like this for the rest of the interview. Do this with your tube amp.
But here's the thing. So just to create a little bit of a timeline, you came out with the Amp 1, what was it, 2013? No, 2014.
I came out 14. I founded BluGuitar on the 1st of February 2014. This is why we have like the 10th anniversary. I didn't talk about that yet, because my first official appearance, where some people knew about it, was at the Frankfurt show in March. I guess it was March or April. Yeah. So, and this is why I will do my 10 years of BluGuitar with that official date.
Okay.
And it was the first time where I showed the M1 officially. But in 2013, I already had one for myself.
Yes. I remember.
And maybe I talked to you.
We spoke at some point, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to shake things up," and that's why I said you kind of introduced a new product category into this market, into this very very small market where you did the M1. A few years later, you kind of tweaked it to a new sort of version, which is now the standard Mercury edition. That's like the standard M1. The other one was then called the Silver edition. And then afterwards, you came up with the Iridium edition, where we actually collaborated, and which was more focused towards the guy who wants like the heavy stuff, in your face, tight low end, that sort of players, like the more contemporary metal player, let's say. All of that happened, and in the meantime, other people kind of try to jump on that wagon, even with things that are not essentially an amp. I mean, if I look at the pedal power amps, like Seymour Duncan, for example, created the Power Stage, which is sort of, it was basically, they were trying to jump on that same wagon where they said, okay, you can have everything on the pedal board. You have your pedals, and then you have a power amp for that, because that was obviously way easier than doing something as sophisticated as like the Amp 1. And then what actually happened was you actually got copied, even with parts by Blackstar. And I mean, you kind of figured out that they also used components that are identical to the ones that you are using, but also they called the whole thing Amped 1 and the Amped 2. And that was when I saw that, I was like, okay, until now Blackstar was kind of an okay company for me, but now it's like, oh, this is kind of very cheap attempt. But you figured out that they were using the same power amp section, or like the same...
No. They used the same power transformer.
Yeah, okay.
And this is something obvious, because my power transformer is custom wound to my specification.
Okay.
Now, why am I going for a power transformer? In the ordinary amp world, it would be so easy to get a standard component. You want, if you want a power transformer, you would go and say, okay, I want this kind of transformer.
I'm going to buy the Mercury Magnetics,
standard.
Or I'm going to buy the...
or whatever. So, but they actually used the same winding pattern isolation pattern, triple isolated wire, and core. That tells me they were digging in deeper than just somebody that is inspired by something. For me, being inspired is totally okay. Nobody comes up with new music without having some inspiration from somewhere.
Yes.
Making this your own creation in a way. That's totally fine with me. And the same is with amplifiers. There's a Mesa Boogie that was based on Fender amps, and then there was the Soldano 39K cassette resistor that we find in a PV 5150 and a Houston Cat.
Yeah, exactly.
And so some, and it was just a lucky accident by Mike Soldano. I mean, but this is like, Keith Richards played Satisfaction, the horn line on the fuzz phase, and this became the iconic thing. So it probably that's but somebody does something, and somebody else or some other company makes this their own version. It's like and there's a line between being inspired and making it your own version. They can go and say, okay, we do a pedal amp, and that's fine, because somebody like myself made the pedal amp a thing. And if they go and said, oh, we have a great idea, let's make pedal amps that have, like Seymour Duncan, not so many preamp channels. We are more a power amp and an EQ, and everybody has a pedal board, and it's a cool product. I have no problems with that. It is different from what I do. But if you go to that level where you actually kind of not only get inspired, but copy things that I'm using, and then even that's the thing, is copying things, not understanding what I'm doing. Which is the next level. That this is, that's kind of a little bit uncool. I mean, they have
you can
they have
be honest here. It's shitty. You're too nice.
No, I'm not even talking. I mean, I'm not even talking about the quality. I mean, there's tons of things like, why having an EQ done on the digital domain? There is analog digital conversion just for the EQ section, and then the power amp thing, which is again an IR to model some power amp characteristics, which is only a Q curve with them. It's another, because they have that after the effects loop. So there's like analog digital conversion, digital analog conversion, another one, and it sums up in 5 milliseconds with a pedal amp. That, I mean, using digital technology to do that is totally the opposite of what I believe in. I have no problems with digital technology if you use that for the things that the technology is best at. But to have a standard guitar EQ, you don't have to model that.
No.
That's fucking simple. It's, and this is what they are doing with. I don't get it. Anyway.
So if I get it right, guys, you're saying I should get the Black Star amp?
Sure, of course. So the moment you should get both and make up your own opinion. But if I can recommend you great Black Star amps too, because this company also has great products.
Yes,
but in having a product named Amp1 after Amp1 is on the market for 6 years or 7 years, weird. Whatever. It's weird. And the same kind of mindset you can find inside. But the Holy Grail nuances that I'm doing, they couldn't do. Therefore, they had They went into the digital domain and tried to do it there, which is totally wrong. With my Amp X, I try to be so analog, because this is what a tube amp is doing, and this is what it's part of the electric guitar instrument quality. I'm not saying digital products are crap. That's not true. Digital domain has some advantages. Analog domain has some advantages.
Yeah.
But if you have an amp that is based on analog technology, you should do as much as you can on the analog side, because this gives you the best quality.
Yes.
And they kind of go back and forth. It's like combining everything you have in a car. Like you have a diesel, a standard fuel, and a rocket, and an electrical car at once, and then the car becomes overweight and has no performance anymore. So either you go this way or that way, and you max out the qualities. And we have products that show that. There are some great digital products out there, and they take advantage of that technology. All my respect. Killer. And it's the same for the analog side.
Yeah. It sounds to me like, because you put in over 20 years of research and development with your own product, that these guys were like, okay, well, if we're going to get in this, we might as well take the Holy Grail, try to retro engineer the thing, and just get the fast track to get the same kind of product on the market, and try to, establish ourselves as pedal amp. That's probably what they did. But at the same time, the shortcuts that they took, and I'm just assuming here, the shortcuts that they took, those are mistakes that you probably worked on throughout the 20 years. You were like, okay, this doesn't work. So that's how you developed a stable product, as opposed to just like taking something and go, well, let's put some innovative ideas and throw this in there. And at the end, you end up with a product that's subpar, because you didn't actually do the road testing and the actual development of that kind of product. Anyways, that's what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, let me do one more comment here. We know the decades of tube amps with most manufacturers. Marshall, Fender, all the big brands, and now even the new brands like Ref or Riviera or Vox and whatnot. And the technology of tube amps has been around for 50, 60, whatever decades. So the experience with this kind of technology and the knowledge in this technology is probably widely known and being shared and copied. And of course, we are at the peak of what can be done. It's now only about the taste of the voicing of the amp. It's not like we can make the tube amps better. We can just voice them better, which makes, of course, a better product. This is why people get crazy about certain amps, because they have the ultimate thump or the whatever. But that's on a level that is using the platform of the tube technology and the knowledge of the amp designer to voice it best. Yeah. So, but there is a certain limit that is from the technology that is kind of reached. You can't go any further with that, because then there's nothing new in the last 60 years.
Yeah.
So when you look at the digital platform, we can see improvements every couple of years. We can see improvements on the sound quality. We can see, because the algorithms are getting better, the conversions are getting better, the performance of the DSPs are getting better, which allows to program better algorithms and stuff like that. So I kind of monitor that side a lot, because that's for me seeing the old school tube technology for decades, I'm just interested about the new flavor that somebody creates, because the rest is boring. It's the same old technology from the engineer point of view, not from the musician point of view. I'm totally excited about a great tone. Doesn't matter where it's come from. I don't care if it's a transistor, a diode, or even the diode that I hated the most in my designs. If somebody creates some great noise with that, I'm all in. So that's that thing. But looking at the companies, what kind of knowledge they are based on, and what kind of knowledge they work on. When they jump on something like what I've done, what they forgot about is it is not only using a transistor discrete technology or whatever, what I'm doing. It's hidden at this kind of stage, and then there is a special power supply. This was the main thing that I could instantly see how somebody the transformer rewound in my specs, and then using the same chip in the different housing. So it's not so obvious, but it's the same family, So that's pretty obvious. But the more subtle stuff that I'm doing, and this is where the sound comes from. This is what it takes hours, is voicing a pedal. It's creating that whatever, stacking gain stages with the voicing. This is where it's getting complicated, and where the quality lives in tube amps or in any amp. This is where, and when you look at this side and you see they don't even have the understanding of what's going on there, because it's totally natural, because they live on tube amps or some modeling, and they had no deep transistor knowledge built up. I started with doing that with Hughes and Kettner last century with the early practice amps. They weren't that bad, but they weren't also that great. But I've been there, and now with the pedal boom, we see amp in the box pedals a lot more, and Frank knows that. If you look at these kind of designs, for instance, the Friedman BOD pedal, if you understand what's going on there's like 5 clipping stages, and there's a hard clip and a soft clip here, and there's a filtering there. This is what's getting pretty close to what's happening in the tube amp.
Yeah, it's true.
But Blackstar guys would have looked at these pedals and understood what the recipe of that is, and do their own version of that, then I would say, fair enough, great. But it's like there's something missing with them. And this is what I'm doing 100% dedicated with the BluGuitar company, because you will see that Hughes and Kettner will go another direction, because they don't have the guys like myself and Bernd Schneider, who sadly passed away, who were totally into that. Let's do it with new transistor or solid state technology instead of tubes or digital. That mindset and the experience is missing. And you have to have people that believe in that and go and develop something with that mindset, that knowledge. And this is what I'm doing with my team. It's not me alone. I have Julian, I have Andre, and I have Andreas, and we are all together. We are 4 guys that do that project. And it's not one guy that modifies the tube amp, and it's not one digital guy who is a genius like Christoph Kemper that has a few other friends that tell him something. No, it's a team, and we kind of understood the spirit and the challenge, and that's what I am doing, and let's see who will compete with us.
I have a question, and it's actually a question that I spoke with Jonathan about, or he came up with the question initially, and we just talked about it briefly. But I would like to get like your kind of view on it. We are seeing on one hand, yes, digital is advancing, and we see a lot of people using digital solutions or DSP-based solutions, or even things that work in the box. So plugins, like especially for bedroom players, plugins obviously are a very good alternative to having an amp and then having maybe some kind of load box or some kind of IR loader, and et cetera, pp. But tube amps in new shapes and forms are coming around, and we see some sort of, at least I see some kind of trend going towards like small wattage, high headroom amps with additional IR technology. Synergy's coming up with this, Friedman's coming up with this, Bad Cat is coming up with this, Ref obviously is doing it for a couple of years. But what we're not talking about is, I see that technicians, and you just brought an example of someone who was on the development side, but if we look at technicians, and especially technicians who know tube amp technology, are dying away. You know, they're going away, and we're going away very fast, and I don't see a whole new generation of technicians. So the question is, in like 20 years' time, who's going to be able to repair all that stuff if something's wrong? Well, I would like your take on that.
Okay, honestly, the full generation of the tube fanatics is passing away. And there is, how to describe it? It's an era in the technology that will never come back, because tubes components of the future, and the guys who learned how to design and repair tube circuitries, they are age 50, 60, 70. So the generation after them, they have no clue about tubes, because they went out of production in the 80s. The last tube designs were probably done in Russia in the 80s, and 90s, 2000s. No, this is 40 years ago. And who on earth is an engineer that wants to learn how this works? There will be only exceptions to that rule.
Okay.
And so that the good news about tube amps is, if you have a basic understanding of electronics, very basic, tube amps are the most basic designs ever. And if you don't know, you will feel, because 500 volts, they hurt. So you know this is the anode.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Don't touch this. I think the good thing about tube amps, especially if they're the vintage amps, which I totally understand, or not totally, but which I understand, is like, okay, there's your two system ACC, ECC 83 preamp tube, and there's whatever your 34 or 6 power amp tube. And once you've seen that, you know, okay, you need this resistor here and this capacitor there, and there's their filter, and this is, you can read and you can see the schematic on the board. Okay, the thing, what will happen with the tube amps is the contacts of the tube sockets, the potentiometers, and all this mechanical stuff will cause the problems, because I have a tube amp collection, and this is what I need my Dioxide 5 spray all the time, and then protect the thing with Vaseline so it doesn't reappear in 5 months again. So this is kind of what I can do, some fixing with not really digging in deep. Then there comes the point where the capacitors will dry out.
Yes.
And then you have to have the guys who understand where and which one to change.
Yeah.
And
yes.
which one is actually the right capacitor to replace this one, not affecting the tone or maintaining the tone. Otherwise, there will be people that put in something like, oh, it needs to have 400 volts, and we put it in here, that's what I've got, but they don't know if that's changing anything.
Yeah.
And that kind of knowledge is now available in this generation of tube maintenance guys or designer guys, because they were interested in, hey, shall we have that mallard or shall we have that whatever RCA tube, and what's the difference of that mustard capacitor to an orange drop to blah blah blah.
But that's exactly that's why I'm asking, because I'm looking at guys like for example the guy I don't know if you know him. Do you know Psionic Audio?
I heard the name, but I don't know the guy.
So basically, the guy is, I think he's in Tennessee or somewhere, and he has a workshop where he repairs and maintains tube amps, and he is actually just filming, documenting the repairs that he's doing, and then uploading them to YouTube. And I recently, this guy's been around. This guy's been around for quite some time, but I recently discovered him when I was trying to go back into kind of like, I learned this initially, but I then forgot it. And since I made the way to pedals, I was like, cool, maybe I could wrap my head around this. And I'm listening to the guy, and I'm like, yeah, okay, A, this guy knows what he's doing. B, he definitely knows like things on a component level. He knows what capacitors to put in and which capacitors not to put in. And on the way, he says, well, this type of Fender amp used to have certain things that were not working, or this, for example, when he was working on some kind of Dumble style amp, and he was like, what Alexander Dumble used to do, or what he was known for, he used to do this in the cathode follow-up stage, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And that kind of knowledge is what's going to be missing. We are going to have people with the basic understanding of how the circuitry works, but we're not going to have people with the kind of encyclopedia in their head that says, well, Fender amps from that era used to have, etc., etc., Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And therefore, I believe that the amount of real boutique amp designers will also shrink. I'm sure there will be some very, very few companies in 10 years that will still design some tube amps, but it's maybe, I don't know about a hi-fi business, maybe similar to them. I don't know how crazy they are and how big the market is. It's probably way smaller and therefore less attractive.
I think the hi-fi bunch is, it's even more niche, especially these days, because the kind of the ways people consume music is so different now. Back in the 80s, back in the 70s and 80s, like having a hi-fi system, a dedicated hi-fi system was everything. I remember my parents having one. I remember my everybody who we knew had like this stack of things where you had like a double cassette deck, and you had the vinyl player, and you had the power amp and all these things, and then it went out to, but that was when people consumed music on vinyls and cassettes, on physical things that they wanted to own, because they also wanted to, you went into some guy's house and was like, look at this is my vinyl collection. And then you saw like 100,000 vinyls, and you were like, whoa. Nowadays, people,
Spotify. This is the epitome of music, man.
Exactly. And nowadays it's like people are not interested in owning anything anymore, because it's out there on streaming platforms. It's available 24/7. It doesn't sound as good, and it doesn't give you the same experience. But then again, people consume different music in a different way these days. So that's why,
Yeah.
the hi-fi bunch. I think this sort of species is even smaller now. It's even more reduced. I don't see people going into a hi-fi store and spending 200 euros on a cable, to be honest.
Yeah, but on the other hand, these hi-fi guys were only the consumers, the listeners. And as a musician, you have to be a player that spends years in practicing to be worth buying a tube amp.
Yes.
And the hi-fi guys, they just had the money and showed the world like, oh, I'm so special. And this is Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon in the super special edition with my gold-plated cable for 300 whatever. And,
Thomas,
they're the same guys buying the Jens Ritter amplifier and guitars. It's the same guys, man.
Yeah, okay. with all these great smaragds or whatever it's called, the special stones.
Yeah, emeralds and sapphires and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I have a great way for you to make more money, Thomas. You just, gold plate the amp one, and then you put like little expensive stones on the top of the potentiometers, and you can ask 30K for an amp. There you go.
That's where the tone is. That's where the tone is, dude.
Yeah, and then the next thing is I have a special holy water treatment.
Okay.
And I spray it on, and I put it next to my tube hi-fi and leave it. Massage it and shrink it into the metal, and then I can hear the holy smoke.
So you're selling the holy Wagyu meat of amps. This amp is only getting fed castañas.
Yeah, sure.
This brings me actually to the question you asked earlier, Frank, was actually if you look on here, it was actually right there, future. I was going to ask the same damn question about like the technicians and the future and all that, and
I'm sorry,
you asked it. I was like, okay, cool, but this brings me to the other question, which is future proofing. So when we look at all the different products that came out throughout the years, like if we look at like 1950s to 60s, the technologies that were there were problem solvers for musicians. So if we look at the Beatles, right, they were playing the AC-15, not loud enough. They kicked it up to the AC-30, not loud enough. They went to the AC-50, not loud enough. AC-100. So they just kept bumping up the amplitude of these amplifiers. And then if you look at the Rivera, well, that's another problem solver. This one had effects loop, it had pentode and triode mode, all this like really fancy stuff, but guys were into rack gear into like the 1980s. And I don't want to like dish out all the different decades, but every single decade had trends and specific needs. So now we look at 2020s, and it seems like everything is all over the place, right? So we have people that are making amplifiers that have the 2-notes technology already built in so that you can go to front of house. You have people that make a pedal, like a really small pedal that is basically like a preamp that you can send to the front of house. But it seems like we have more options today and more confusion with the musicians. And when I look at the Amp 1, it seems like you future-proofed the product. You made something that is going to work well for musicians in the studio, for live and for home use. And it looks like you thought of a certain problem going forward. It wasn't just a thing that was a trend. Like if you remember like the lunchbox amps in the early 2000s, everybody was making those. Well, it looks like you made a product that wasn't going to cater to whatever was trendy at the time, but something that was going to be useful to people. So what was the inception of the Amp 1? What was the product that, not the product, but the problem that you saw coming that you wanted to solve with it?
Very simple. I have been on airplanes with a flight case with a 25 kilogram amplifier inside the flight case, tube amp. If you ever have done this, you know this is not a solution. You have a problem. And I was never happy with rental gear when I was playing somewhere. Flying to Hamburg, which is North Germany, from Saarbrücken, it's option one is you drive by car, which is 7 hours drive. And if you have to do a fly gig, it's a cozy morning flight and next morning return. Yeah. And on that little flight, I can take my guitar, and that's it. And I'm known to be the guy that kind of unscrews the neck of a Stratocaster and goes hand luggage all the way. So I don't even have. Really? I only do carry-ons. So in that little bag that I have, I can get my Strat, I can get an Amp 1, I can get some clothes, and I'm good to go. I'm under every limit. That's why the Amp 1 still is the lightest 100-watt tube amp these days, because I was maxing out the stuff that I wanted, because I thought of air travel, and this is 1.2 kilograms and not, I mean, I could have a real heavy metal bottom plate, but it's too heavy.
Yeah, it's too heavy.
I didn't want to do that. So this is my fly rig, and it's the complete thing. So my idea was based on the suffering that I was facing traveling, and I knew that I am not the only one, because I have colleagues in other bands that have been at the same thing, and I could see that the whole industry is changing. I mean, around 2000 or in 1997, I was in Tic-Tac-Toe. There was my backliner that came to my living room that packed up everything, and I didn't touch the gear anymore. But the industry, the music industry, was kind of changing already, because the heydays with big money in the industry was gone. So where to save money? Well, probably on the hired musicians, because the boss of the band still wants to keep the income being the most important, and it's top down. So this guy gets the most, and the rest gets the rest.
Yeah,
and
true.
So I've been there, and I faced that as my reality, and of course that left some marks, because not only my hand with that heavy shit on the airport, it's mentally. This told me a story mentally, and therefore I thought, there's nothing wrong about my good old tube amps. I still have them here and blah, blah, blah. And they sound great, but I don't use them anymore. I actually don't use them for decades anymore. They're still sitting there, and I'm even recording with my Amp 1 now. I'm not missing anything. I'm torn. Do I like that Plexi better or my Amp 1 vintage channel? It's on that level.
Yeah.
It's like I need to have I'm not saying the Amp 1 is the best amp, no, but it's one of the best in my collection. And I have 3 Marshalls, and I would say the vintage channel is also in this territory. And it's like, and then it's so practical, I end up using the Amp 1, period. And the other reality that I see is when I kind of quit the big hired gun business that I've done, and I pay for everything myself. Traveling in the car, the first thing I wanted is a smaller cabinet, not 4x12 anymore. And this goes back to like 2000, where I tried to sneak out of that business. My 4x12s kind of retired, and I did my first replacement for that, which was based on a Mesa cabinet that was copied by using Kettner, and then I was not happy with the whole thing, so I tweaked the whole thing till I was happy. Now
that was the one with the Thiele calculation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
It's, so the Mesa was still fucking heavy because it had a 12L speaker in there.
Yeah.
It was small and compact. So, and back in the days, Matthias Jabs had a little relationship with Houston Kettner. He told the guys, get this cabinet, but with a different speaker, no problem. We've done that cabinet. I played that cabinet. I thought, oh, this is nice and small, but I didn't like that speaker too much. And I didn't like the cabinet all the way. I just like the form factor. So what I've done is I made it bigger. I changed the Thiele small parameters and the housing, because there's like a resonance inside the cabinet, and there is the extra low end you get from this. So, and I experimented very simple stuff, did a few versions, and that's became my fat cap, which I play for 20 years now. For 10 years with my own speaker, before that with Celestian speakers. But it's like, it's all based on the same personal problems solving, my personal problems.
And just for people to get kind of an overview of that. So you currently have 3 different cabinets in your lineup. You have the fat cap, which is a 1x12, but a little bit bigger. Yeah. You have one that's smaller.
That's the nano
cap, and you have the 2x12.
Twin
cap. And just for people to get an idea, how much does the nano cap, which is a 1x12, how much does it weigh?
8 kilograms.
8 kilograms. The fat cap?
Yeah, and I have to look it up.
I think maybe something like 11, 12-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
And then the twin cap, which is the 2x12,
is 17 or something. It's definitely below 20.
Yeah.
And with every cabinet, I try to save weight. And for instance, like on the twin cap, I have bracing, like stabilization inside the cabinet so I can use thinner wood, but still have no fluffy low end and stuff. So you can play with all these parameters. I have seen quite interesting products at the NAMM show, fiberglass cabinets, and even a speaker with a flat piece of something. I'm getting inspired here because these ideas I had for many, many years. But I'm experimenting with neodymium speakers, and I have a very happy accident. It's not an accident, no, but I have a very happy result with my nano cap, because I'm known to be the fat cap. That's my main cabinet. And last year, on the 28th of December, I played the nano cap with a new prototype speaker, neodymium, which makes it 5 kilos, the whole thing. And I was not missing my fat cap. It was like scary. This little thing now can do it all for me. It doesn't get any smaller than this, because 12-inch is what you need to move the air in my world. Yeah. And it's not a product yet, but I know this is the way of thinking. And then with the thinner wood, it doesn't make any sense to save weight there, because it's already 5 kilograms. You can easily, or even less. I have to make a measurement or weigh it, but it's like unbelievable. It's like if you make it lighter, it will fly away.
That's what I wanted to people who are listening to this and watching this, and who have not experienced this in person yet, kind of like try to understand. There is essentially you're making a 1x12 cabinet that, because of the way it's constructed, actually
Yes.
can produce like the same amount of like perceived volume and thickness of a 4x12. That's essentially the concept.
That's crazy.
While only weighing around 8 kilos, which is like, I mean, with 8 kilos, I'm smoking and joking if I have to go to the gigs, it's easy peasy. And then, with an amp one that you can just keep in the pocket of your, guitar gig bag, if you show up to a gig like that, you won't ever have back issues, and you'll still get a great sound. I just wanted people to understand what we're talking about. And then, so the latest sort of iteration is the Amp X, which you've been working on for quite some time now. And I always see people in like Facebook groups, and it's like, hey, is it really coming this year? Do we want to create like a little betting game if it comes this year, or it's So are you confident? I'm going to ask the question. Are you confident that Amp X is going to be released this year?
Yes. But the point is in which numbers. Where I am at is like, okay, I wear the shirt because this is what I play, and every concert that I play from now on is played on the Amp X. The components are already sourced, so we are kind of ready for production. But the point is, I will do one more PCB revision based on what I'm currently doing. I'm happy with the traditional amp designs, and I achieved something that makes me super happy. I can have power amp saturation with no side effects at any volume.
Ooh.
And that's something I was dreaming about my whole entire life, even with my tube amps, because if you have a power soak, there is always a little loss here and there, and you can try to be better, but just by nature, there is a problem.
Yeah.
And I found a solution how to get this done. And this was just happening at the end of last year. So there's like an extra PCB for that kind of thing. And there was another aspect of aging the sound of an amp too, because I was doing a replica of my 57 Tweed Deluxe amp, and if you measure it and if you do a replica on this new platform, it sounded like a replica and not like the real deal old amp. So where's but I wanted that, so that's what's done. Currently, we are working on the super high gain side on the other end of the spectrum. And last week we had, I think we had covered that too. I need more challenges, and Frank, maybe we have to talk about this off topic, because there's a few more that I have on my list to do on that platform, and then I can sign off the amp section. There's a little bits on the pedal section that I want to change, but then this goes into production, and I know this will be frozen forever because I cannot do, and I don't want to do an update, because a small company like BluGuitar then would have an Amp X and then an Amp X Mark II, and then how to get a compatible sound, and it's a mess. So the time that I spend now is a good investment for BluGuitar, and even more a good investment for anybody who will potentially get one of these.
I have a serious question for you, Thomas.
Yeah.
Will you be sending one of these units to Black Star so they can copy it and call it the Amped X?
I think I won't do it personally, but somehow they will get hands-on one, I'm sure.
They're good. Probably. So you got the guy working for years trying to get it perfect. 6 months later, there's a copy. Oh, gotta love it.
Yeah. But yeah, whenever there's so many things in this amp, even if they would have the schematics, they probably would not understand it. Because this is what I could see on their amp one already. They got a lot, but they didn't have the complete schematics somehow. And from what they have understood, they only got 60%.
Great.
So I'm pretty confident, even if they had the classified information, they still would not get it. Why? You have the years that I spent with my guys doing that. It's logical progressions on many levels. And I mean, Frank is designing his own pedals lately, and I think you start to understand, like, this guy is doing this kind of circuitry, this is kind of this circuitry. You're getting more familiar with this, and there's like the special trick that he has with this pedal. Okay, but sometimes when you look at things, you don't even understand what to look for. And by the way, this is another comment about the future of guitar amps in general. The tube guys with all that background knowledge will pass away one day. And the digital guys and the other guys, they need to know what is important to look at. If you don't know what is creating that magic, you cannot create the magic, even if you potentially could. You understand? This is and that's probably the biggest problem. If you, I mean, my job basically is to make challenges for other technicians that are black and white. It's like, this is where, talking about a power amp, it's what happens there, what happens, and why do we see only very strange solutions to problems, like power soak. And are you actually aware of what's happening there? Do you see how the signal is changed? Do you understand the interaction with the speaker? Do you understand the interaction of all the stages in the amp? And a technician probably sees some things, but do they have the complete picture? I'm not having the complete picture, and I'm in the industry for decades, and I think I have a very big understanding of what's important for the tonal influence and where things happen. And I know a few solutions, but I know that most of the solutions are not even good. And therefore, I have created my own team with technicians that are probably not as musical understanding. But if I challenge them with the right things, that I want this behavior, I want this kind of thing, then we are talking. And don't come back with anything that is boring copy from somebody else. That's my job.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I totally understand what you're saying in regards to engineers and technicians. I once collaborated with an Italian amp company on a series of amps that they released, because their engineers, God bless them, unbelievable engineers. You told them what you wanted, and they were like, okay, we are going to go to the lab, and we are going to come back in about an hour. So they essentially had a good sounding rock amp, and they wanted to make this a good sounding heavy amp, but they didn't have the players. They did not know people who were like touring extensively within that like sort of metal context. So the one of the guys, like the distributor of the guy who I knew personally, reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in going down to Italy and like help us? Maybe we can come up with something." So we went down there, and they kind of had like a couple of amps in there. Like they had they had a Randall, they had an Engel, they had a Marshall, a diesel amp, I believe, as well. So all the stuff that I was able to figure out and dial in and everything. And then I dialed the things in, and I had my guitar obviously with me, and then played around on a little bit. And these guys were like, "Oh, okay, we would never know how to produce a sound like that." So they took all the amps into the lab, and they came back like 1.5 hours later, and probably a couple of espressos, and came back and brought the raw amp out and gave it to me to try, and it was like, yeah, that's great, but can you hear what's happening in the lower mid range? It's not pronounced enough. It's not going to cut through in the band. It's gonna sound great in this room, but it's not going to sound great in the band. So we need to kind of up that a little bit. And while you're at it, make the bass control active in a way so you can also cut it out. And they were like, "Okay, we understand what you're talking about." Went back, came back, great result. So in the end, obviously, if you can combine these two things, if you have a good ear, a musical ear, and you know what you're doing on a musical level, and you have the knowledge about circuitry, and you can like turn that into, on the soldering board, that's amazing. Yeah. But obviously, there is a much different like sort of dynamic when it's you and two of your guys, and you go to them and you say, "Hey, this and this and this and this and this, let's work on it. This is the challenge." No?
Yeah. It's a team. First, it's a team. And second is everybody has its own personal strengths.
Yes.
I can spend hours tweaking little subtle things. Nobody else has the patience for, or it doesn't even hear it, or doesn't care about it, or whatnot. Yes. So then I have a guy who is totally about designing circuitries and with the real challenge. If I wouldn't have that guy, I wouldn't be able to make the amp as compact and as lightweight and as efficient and stuff like that. He hates it if I start to do the frequency bullshit. It's not even doesn't matter. For him, it's like, leave me alone with this, fucking hours of dong, 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 ding, 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 dong, dong, ding, ding, dong, 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 ding, dang, dong, ding. I can spend hours perfectioning this end. Yeah. On the other hand, is on his circuitry that allows me to do what I want. And therefore, this is part of the team, And so these elements, and we are 4 in total. Yeah. BluGuitar has only 1 salesperson, but 4 engineers. So we are nearly the wrong kind of company, no sales force. But this is my life. This is my company. This is where my money goes. And as long as I'm happy, all is good. But in the real world, business world, you would have 4 salespeople and 1 engineer.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. 100%.
Yeah. And then you would buy some Chinese something, put on your own label, and then maybe make it sound a little bit more purple.
Yeah.
By changing capacitor 32 and changing the resonance frequency of whatever the low end. And there's your product, create a story, and have 4 people selling it. BluGuitar is different. I do both sides. I'm happy to be my own product guy as well, but also being on the design thing. But nearly no salespeople. For me, my belief is if the product is future ready, there's a future for us.
Yes.
And the more people will discover it, and I'm doing the word of mouth marketing, and we're still not bankrupt, so something must be right.
Are we able to talk about, or am I able to ask about blueprints?
Yeah,
Yes?
you can
also,
ask.
Oh yeah, I'm not
the question
sure.
is what
No, if I, because I know it's not a secret, but I'm not sure how far fetched, how far developed the idea is. But I'm just gonna ask anyway. And I'm no maybe Jonathan, you don't know what a blueprint is, but it's essentially this. So on the AmpX platform, you're going to be able to like load in different pedals into the circuit, into the amp, and then amps exactly.
And
Thomas came up with the idea.
I have to get the battery recharger for the laptop, otherwise
no worries. Sure. You just go.
Me a minute?
I keep talking. No worries.
Okay.
I'm gonna explain to Jonathan.
Oh, you could send letters and we'll just read his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, blueprints. I just explained the concept to Jonathan, which I think is a great idea. Not only for you to expand what's available within the AmpX, but also for many small manufacturers and guys who make pedals to A, maybe get a little bit more exposure, B, to have like at least to some extent like an additional income stream, because they can sell the blueprints. Obviously, you are going to take a cut for providing the platform, for doing your magic and the implementation, etc. But this, I think this is an absolute brilliant idea. How far is that along? Is that something that, let's say, in June you're going to ship out the first AmpX? Is that something that's already out there for people to use?
We have a special company, another engineer company, that programmed the communication from the website, from my AmpX, that's what it's called, to be able to have the encrypted data that goes onto the AmpX. So that's software does exist. Okay. We have to have a bit more testing there. But it exists, which means that in theory we are able to get there and are ready to provide some of the first blueprints, amps, and pedal effects. As much as we can do in parallel, we are doing.
Okay.
But it needs us again for the field test.
Yes.
So that's why everything takes a bit longer than expected. Also, my plans are always another month here and another month there. But since I know this exists, at least at the version that is kind of working, we have to prove things, maybe improve things, but it's existing. Yeah. That makes me confident that the whole thing will happen this year.
Okay, nice.
And I have a few amps that I can do myself, which I now use as test amps for the platform. And as there's more time, we can also do the collaboration things, like with Nobel's ODR1 is one, and maybe with Frank as well.
Yes.
Because he has some.
Yes, 100%. He has some great 100%. I'm happy to send my stuff over and participate. I'm super excited to do that.
And that's that. And I think the good thing about that is we can make the pedal accessible for other people. They can use it on the amp one.
Yes.
But if they they can try it with their own gear.
Yes.
And then if they want to keep it, they have to pay for it. But it's not like you buy a pedal, you get it in the post, and then you discover it's not the right pedal for me. No, you have it on the amp one. You can test it with your setup and then decide. And then you can even get it as a physical pedal and use it with some other gear that you're using. That's all part of the concept.
Yeah, I just really like that concept, and absolutely happy to participate.
I'm gonna have a question for you, Thomas. My first interaction with you is via YouTube. So I know you're not going to remember because this is a long time ago, but you were doing essentially a demo, I think, of Valbrook pedals, but you were using the Amp 1. So you had a few pedals from the company and you were doing a demo. And I remember writing to you in the comments saying, like, what amp are you using? And you're like, I'm using my own amp.
Yeah.
And I went down the rabbit hole, and most of the content that I found was actually the best videos were your videos.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about all the technologies that you have, right? But the one thing that we should focus on is actually how great the amps sound. Like I've never played one. I wanted to play it when I was over at Guitar Summit, but man, you were busy. Your booth was filled with people. And I was trying to get in, and my wife is like, go talk to him. I'm like, I can't. There's too many people. I wanted to see the unit, ask you questions about it. So what I did instead is just go back and watch the videos. And it seems to me like you have a great ear for tone, and there's no compromise when it comes to the quality of the tone you're able to get. And I'm not kissing your ass here. I'm just like genuinely saying what I've heard is that your unit has... It sounded to me like you were using a tube amp. It didn't sound like you were using any sort of modeling or anything. I had the impression that what you had in front of you was like some kind of pedal, and it turned out to be the amp. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't get to sound that good. Like I've tried stuff like that, you know, that were like these little modeling things, and they sounded okay. But yours sounded like you were playing through an actual tube amp in the back. How did you go about achieving that? Was there like a process, a technology that you're using, or was it just fine tweaking until you got the result you wanted?
No, the first is the philosophy. The philosophy that I have is I'm doing exactly what is happening in an old traditional tube amp, from the input stage to the output stage. And if you try to make a shortcut and try to get the output sound from the input stage, you're not getting the same results. Example, Friedman. Friedman understands the Van Halen tone because he is LA, he's had look in Eddie's amp and blah, blah, blah. And his latest amp that he brought out under Friedman is a 50-watt Plexi, just with a few more modern features that get this amp to a modern way of, reducing the output volume, wattage, in any means that he has in his arsenal to make this unbelievably alive amp usable in modern times. Funny thing is, I have exactly the same taste like him, because the first amp that I kind of did on the Amp X is a 50-watt Plexi from the same year, 69. And so without talking to him, we both go to the NAMM show, and we kind of both have our versions of that same kind of amp there. And he understands why that power amp is so crucial, because he says, I'm not doing an effects loop in my amp. Because the sound is happening in the power amp stage. So if I do the effects loop there, it's halfway if I would put the thing in front of the amp. So why do it at all? He knows that. And I'm so proud that I said, I have the whole thing in there, and I can have that tone without and I have the effects loop. So, but what I try to say in the end is, listen to him talking about his amps and that new amp. You will feel that he is saying, okay, this is a bit black and white colored from my side. It's like my famous BOD is trying to get that power amp saturation in the preamp stage. It's a pretty nice thing. It's very controlled and it's a modern design, but it's actually not the whole magic. That's why I created this old school amp design without a power amp, without an effects loop, to have this really alive amp. And I understand that for many years, and I understand that this is important, even if it's not about 100% power amp overdrive. It's about what happens in the power amp stage, in every stage, not only in the gain stage. Most people EQ something, have a gain stage, and then have a neutral, whatever, loud maker, camper style. There's my modeling, and there's a shortcut. Maybe I will get there in this neutral thing once I have been there. You have to really replicate everything to understand what it's doing. Therefore, some tube amp designers only believe that tube amps can do it, because this is why today's amps have maybe 20 watts, 18 watts, or maximum 50 watts. So they have the tube goodness at lower volume, which is today's reality. And the rest is like, okay, I have my preamp voice, but I can have access to both ends, to the power amp and the preamp stage. I knew this for the last 30 years or even longer, that this is so important, because when I was in the studio, even at age 17, the first thing I learned is crank the amp. Because the power amp did more to the good tone than my preamp. The preamp I could also fake with a pedal a little bit, but it was all the how huge the sound is in the studio has a lot to do with the power amp. Is this giving you the compression and sag and the blah and the whole magic? This is where, boom, your guitar is big in the mix, and it's not like a me. I had suffered this in the studio also with my Mesa Boogie, because the Mesa Boogie was too stiff and therefore sounded too thin.
Okay.
And then I learned the hard way, okay, I modified my Mesa to have less gain, but then I bought a Marshall because there is other things happening. The Mesa has qualities, the Marshall has qualities, but I understood this even at the age of 17. So, and over the years, I kind of understood more details here and there and how important things are. And of course, that is what is always my challenge. And when I do a product like the Amp 1, I knew it has to come from the power amp for every stage. If I skip one stage, if I skip one ingredient in the tone, I will miss something. And that's why it sounds and feels. It feels also the same. This is why I always do the A/B switching, and I have guests coming to my show and I ask them, bring your amp, and I try to come close. And in the end, it's like, okay, sometimes there are subtle differences, which are totally understandable, because I didn't design my amp to be a exact whatever real tone or this Marshall. I did my own voicing in a way, but it's in the same ballpark.
Yeah. Just two little remarks that kind of confirm what you just said, especially when it comes to Friedman. So whenever I played a Friedman amp, and all of them, they sound great in their own way. Whenever I played one of them, I always had like the feeling that changing the volume of the power amp wasn't doing anything to them. And then at some point, I was talking to my good buddy Dennis, who is also
the sales manager,
who was part of Boutique Amps distribution, and he said, "But what's going on? Something like this is getting louder, but nothing's changing." And he kind of confirmed what I was feeling. Where he was saying like, "Well, with Dave, it's like everything happens in the preamp, and you just increase the volume." But it's not going to do anything to it's not going to saturate the whole thing more, or it's not going to add certain characteristics to it. So everything is happening in the preamp. And then the other thing, when it comes to the effects loop, I've heard Joe Morgan saying the same thing once, where he said, "I'm not going to put an effects loop in any of my amps because that is going to make people believe they can put anything in there and not harm what's happening, to the power amp dynamics. Because as soon as you put something in the effects loop, that very thing and the processing of that very thing that you're putting in there is going to affect the dynamic and the behavior of the power amp. And I don't want that with my amps." So just these two things that...
In these amps, in the Morgan amps, for instance, the power amp is mostly important for the tone. It's like certain amps, they have more happening in the power amp stage, especially the vintage amps, and then more modern amps have probably more happening in the preamp stage. And I kind of personally want both. I was always a vintage amp player that had a hotter preamp thing, either with a pedal or with a modification. So, and then I try to balance out both things, and I can scale this down to a crunch tone, a clean tone, or whatever. But I want all the stages to work and interact. That's, to me, the ideal. And I totally get it when Dave Friedman is doing the BUD with the neutral power amp, because he kind of gets that tone which is not doing exactly the interaction with the speaker and the aliveness as the Van Halen kind of thing, but it has that, it's a similar noise and it's more controlled.
Yeah, it's more controlled.
And then having that master volume without any side effects, it's also a quality by itself.
Yes.
No? So it's this is all different kind of philosophies, but in the end, it's from both sides, Morgan and Friedman, we understand what is happening and how important it is. And by the way, these people understand tube amps at the level that it is needed to create great sounds.
Yeah.
No? Not only by changing a few components, but understanding what's actually happening.
100%. We usually try to keep this within the 2-hour time frame, so people are not getting bored and stuff. But we have a section. We have a very important section, which is Jonathan's domain, where we shoot a couple of rapid fire questions towards you, and they're kind of tailored. So Jonathan, take it away.
Just before I get to that, I have one more question for you, Thomas. I saw when I was at Guitar Summit, I saw that you had an old Vox AC30 at your stand. Can you tell me just a little bit more? Because my YouTube channel, I do a lot of Vox amplifier stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, what the hell? Like, I've never seen an old AC30 in person. So that was like the first one I saw. How did you come by it? Is it modeled in your Amp One or the VX? It's in there. Yep.
Okay. This Vox AC30 I bought maybe 30 years ago, a very long time ago, and it's a copper plate with silver Bulldog speakers. The silver Bulldogs are exactly the same as blue Bulldogs, but just a silver cover. And it's, I guess, a 64. I'm not the vintage collector. When I bought it, I didn't care. It was a good killer sounding Vox AC30. Now people go, oh, it's from whatever. I think it's 64. Okay. This amp has a modification to be 100% authentic non-top boost, and has the top boost modification done by a German technician called Manfred Reckmeyer, who is the Pope, I would say, of AC30s. The Marshall Popes, the guys who understand Marshalls better than anyone, but he is the AC30 guy. So I gave this amp 30 years ago to Manfred and told him I want the Peter Weihe mods. Peter Weihe is Germany's most recorded studio session player, and the Vox AC30 was his weapon to go. So I bought this amp when I was a session player myself as the weapon of choice in the studio, and having the flexibility between both worlds, top boost and non-top boost, and is important. Because more flexible and totally back to authentic vintage, not changed. Okay, so this is like I can skip the thing completely to make it authentic, this or the other model. Okay. The amp has been used on many recording sessions because there's nothing like an AC30 when it comes to clean or crunchy chords that are sparkly. Was always the winner. You play two chords and the producer is happy. It's like, boy, the chime and the growl, everything is just like perfect. It's not like a Marshall that is, I smell like rock, because I was booked for a lot of pop productions, and the AC30 is simply one of the best to do this in general. So that's my amp there, and I have already done a version of that on the Amp X, and especially the power amp zagging is important to that sound. And it's there. The thing that I learned with the Amp X is sometimes I do little changes on the hardware still, and then I have to redo my whole thing. And the more redos I'm doing, the better the models get. So it's still a kind of a learning curve how to drive that new Amp X with the knowledge that I have. I'm the vintage fanatic, and I know all my vintage amps are spot on so far. Let's see. And I'm even hoping for myself that I can probably improve some of the amps on certain aspects that is not even possible on the originals. Let's see.
Okay.
So it's totally exciting project for me. It's totally exciting. So, but AC30, yes, it will be one of the blueprints for sure.
That's awesome. Now, this brings me to the final questions. So I usually ask top threes, because when you go 5, 6, whatever, people get lost. So my first question for you, what are your top 3 go-to guitar pedals?
Pedals. Yes. Okay. My personal preference is the Hughes-Kettner Replex, which is a tube tape echo. It's a remake of the first tube tape Echoplex. We all know the EP3 booster, and we all know that Van Halen was using an Echoplex with a tube, and that's the one that I like. And I also like that tape echo effect that is created by the wobble and the stuff. So the Echoplex itself is not usable because mechanics and hum and blah blah blah. But the Usen-Kettner pedal is on my pedal board since I designed it, and it's still there, and it's now in the Amp X. So this is my Thomas Blug, and that pedal is magic. The second pedal is a small stone phaser.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I need a boost, but that's the flavor of the day. So I have too many of those. If I had to pick one, it's a hard decision because I can kind of do it with many boosts in a way, but it Frank probably knows it best. Every boost has a slow owned. It's a spice, and it's like it brings the amp to a certain place where it's more alive, and then it is like the adapter between the guitar and the amp, and then what you have in your head, and the parameter that I have in my head changes the boost. So there is the Fire Bottle by Effect Road from the UK. It's a tube boost that I like a lot, but there is, some of Frank's boost is killer because you have the options of tweaking frequencies and stuff like that. There's a Church of Tone 50 boost, which I like a lot, which was an inspiration for Amp 1 boost, to be honest. It's not the same, but it's an inspiration.
Okay.
And totally different circuitry, by the way. And there's like, for instance, like a Vertex, what is it, the steel string kind of thing. It's a nice one. But I could make instantly 50 boosts.
So that was a hard question.
One more thing about the Replex. The Replex has a tube stage, which is a great boost, and has a tube echo. So I can live with two pedals.
2 in 1. There you go.
Yeah.
So speaking of guitar amps, what are your favorite 3 guitar amps?
If I'm not talking about my own amps, I would say, okay. One of those, it's either my 50-watt Plexi from '69, my JTM 45, so that's the Marshall category, and then the Vox AC30 is another one. And I would love to have a super reverb as well.
Oh yeah,
which I have. So it's a super reverb AC30, and my favorite Marshall, but I have 5 of them. It's like the boosts,
So I've discovered you a bit later, and I've always associated you with Strats. If I'm to ask you what your top 3 guitars are they all Strats, or do you have others that you're into?
Okay, well, my number 1 Strat is next to me. It's this one. And actually, I just need one guitar that is a Strat. Then I have a Les Paul in the 335. I also have a Super Strat and a Tele, but it's like 80% is Strat, because that's my personal voice. And then I now have a decent Les Paul, even though my 335 sounds a bit better. And so I'm torn there. This Strat is so good that I don't need a Tele, because it has so much twang. on the bridge pickup. So I can do the and it's not a telly and it will never be a telly, but I can play that guitar easily to replace a telly okay? So, and then a Les Paul is probably from the handling, even though the 335 has a bit more air.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So now you've mentioned throughout the podcast that you've worked on a lot of product development with different companies. Out of everything you've done, what is the top 3 that you're the proudest of?
Oh, that's a hard question. What I'm the proudest of? Okay, of course, I'm very proud of my own stuff. So if we try to exclude that, let's try to exclude that.
Okay.
Or make this. I'm my Amp 1 and my Amp X is so intense for me. Of course, I'm the proudest of that because I put everything I own behind it. I mean, my skills and my money and everything. So that's okay. But now with working with other people, I mean, working for Hughes & Kettner 27 years, I have done probably 100 products, even bass amps, like quantum bass amps, and trying to make the Ampeg a little lighter, and studio gear, like a dual tube channel mic preamp with special things. So we have also different genres of products we have to talk about. So what am I proud of? Maybe let's talk about the Hughes & Kettner Triamp. The Triamp is a product that I played myself for up until, 10 years ago, from 1995 to 95, 20 years at least. So, and that's a 13 tubes loaded all tube head with like 6 channels. It's that one of those multi-channel heads designed at a time when there were not multi-channel heads. I think this was pre-Buchner Ecstasy or whatever.
I think it was.
And it was.
I think it was around the same time when guys like Peter Diesel would start, but they wouldn't be successful with their stuff until it really reached a lot of influential people in the US.
Yeah, actually, I don't know exactly. It's too long ago. For me, I spent so much time with this product on stages and also studio, and this was a companion for me that I enjoyed a lot, and I did a lot with it. So there's a natural bond with it, and using pedals with it and not pedals and this guitar and so I'm kind of, and I'm proud of that amp being played by Alex Lifeson for a while and so on.
Okay, and there's one missing. Yeah. So we have your own stuff. We have the Triamp. Anything else that you remember, like on the top of your head, that you co-created that was like that to this day made you?
This made me proud. The Rotosphere, Hughes & Kettner Rotosphere.
Oh, the Rotosphere, true.
This is the Leslie's. The Leslie being used by my hero Jeff Beck, and any guitar player who's into Leslie's, especially the guys with more tone. The more tone, the more Rotosphere they go. Still, up until today, it's noisy, but it is still a great Leslie simulator.
Yeah. Nice,
perfect. So, and my last question for you, Thomas. I asked this of every guest that we've had on, and most people have like a really clear idea of what it is. I'm probably the only guy who has an issue, but I figured it out last episode with Frank. Desert Island Rig. So 1 amp, 1 guitar, and a select few pedals. What would that look like for you?
For me, it's pretty easy. It's that Strat, okay? And if I don't have that Strat, I have a replica of that Strat, and they're getting better every day. And for me, it's my Amp X, because there is all my favorite amps, including my Amp 1 and my Marshalls, and my Vox is in there. And the pedal that I need is the expression pedal, so I can use the wah-wah.
Nice.
Yeah, but I can give you another answer, not talking BluGuitar, to be fair. Okay, if this wouldn't exist, it would still be the Strat. Okay, it would be one of my Plexi Marshalls, and it would be the Echo, the Replex.
Tube Replex.
Okay.
Yep.
Simple, effective. There we go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. What makes me happy is my whole entire amp and pedal collection will shrink and up in here, and my place will be cleaner, and also my head space will be cleaner. I find it exciting to collect these pedals, to learn about sounds, to experience the pedals. But now I'm on the next level where I try to get and use the stuff in a way. And I noticed that the less is more. It was my last episode in my Academy of Tone live stream, by the way. That there's a beauty in that. And on the other hand, it's like, you build your pedal board and you have your favorite pedals on there. And this is what you live with. I enjoyed my last pedal board so much, but I'm happy to have a new pedal board with new options here. And I'm looking into a future that I'm excited to see what I will do with a few more options, because there's no hassle. The real estate is not a thing. I will still be reduced in a way, but I will have a new mixture probably. Let's see.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm currently looking forward to get my hands on one of those. We definitely need to talk offline.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks anybody for chiming in. Thanks for listening. And we thank Thomas for taking the time to talk to us. And we are going to talk to you again next week. Remember, every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central European Time, a new episode. Until then, see ya.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.